Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro from WIS hanging out with you on your Tuesday morning. It is time for a heavy lifting segment brought to you by our friends over at TEC Equipment Rentals in West Columbia. And the players of the NFL doing some heavy lifting here recently as they voted on their top 100 players in the league. So you're literally voting amongst your peers on who the best players in the NFL are. Number one on the list, Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins. Now, this spurred a lot of controversy when the list became official over the weekend. Now, again, Tyreek Hill, monster year last year. 1,799 yards, 13 touchdowns. Looked like he was going to be on pace to maybe shatter Calvin Johnson's all-time single-season receiving record. Did have an ankle injury that slowed him down. Obviously, that Miami offense down there is just all kinds of crazy, with Tua and what they're able to do with all the movement and stuff like that. And Tyreek Hill is obviously a huge, huge part of that. But is he better than Patrick Mahomes? I think is the question here, because Mahomes being at the forefront of this dynasty that we now have with the Kansas City Chiefs, can you really say that not only is Tyreek Hill better than him, are Lamar Jackson and Christian McCaffrey technically better than him too?
Okay, Lamar, absolutely not. I don't know why. Personally, if you have Lamar and Mahomes flipped, so you have Lamar 4, McCaffrey 3, Mahomes 2, and Tyreek 1, I'd say even that's slightly more fair. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand Lamar led the Ravens to one of their best regular season performances in multiple years, but, I mean, Mahomes just won another ring basically off an incredible second half performance with Travis Kelce last year. And I could see, don't get me wrong, Tyreek Hill, like you said, on pace to, break Calvin Johnson's record. I see why they gave him 1, just because, like you said, anytime you're mentioning another wide receiver in the same breath as Calvin Johnson, you got to recognize that kind of game. But Mahomes is coming off another championship. And he wasn't really working with a whole lot in that run either. I mean, it was kind of him and Kelce running the show in that game. And in the first half, that 49ers defense looked like they were going to have the clamps on him.
And that, to me, is a really big point around all this, because, yes, in years past, he's had a little bit more help as far as the weapons around him. But last year, outside of Travis Kelce, he had no help in his receiving core. They led the league in drops season ago. Rashee Rice started popping off a little bit more in the playoffs. But for the most part, and talk about heavy lifting, I think Patrick Mahomes did so much of the heavy lifting on that offense last year for Kansas City. I think that makes that Super Bowl maybe the most impressive out of the 3, because they were still able to do it despite the fact they probably didn't have their best team around him. So here's the thing. Is there this fatigue factor with Mahomes and with the Chiefs? Because people don't like dominance, right? We appreciate, the Chiefs, they finally, with this great quarterback, and, Andy Reid, they won the first Super Bowl a couple years ago. That's awesome. And they win it a couple years later. Okay, that's cool. Then they win another one. Then people start to kind of think all right, now I'm kind of starting to get sick of this a little bit. And again, we're talking about a list here that was voted on by other NFL pros. This is all the other players in the league voted on this list. I feel like that internal fatigue with the Chiefs contributes to why he's number 4 on this list.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, I think it has more to do with why Tyreek is number 1 and less of why Mahomes is number 4. Kind of going off what you were saying, the repetitiveness of seeing, the greatness over and over and over again. We've seen Mahomes perform at a high Super Bowl type of level with little to no talent, especially in that receiver core. I think a lot of people were surprised McCaffrey was as efficient as he was consistently throughout the entire season. I don't think we've seen a running back play at a high level like that week in and week out since maybe Todd Gurley on the Rams. But, and I also think kind of to that excitement factor as well. Maybe Lamar being number 2 was, I believe it was the Ravens won 13 regular season games this year. I mean, him kind of leading them to that with also
and he was
Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, that's also Mark Andrews was one of the best tight ends in the league, a season prior, and then he kind of was in the, didn't really show up this year. I mean, I could see a lot of the players voting Tyreek Hill number one because they're looking at him like, oh my God, he had this Calvin Johnson-esque season. And if he didn't get injured, he would have probably could have had the potential to surpass what he was doing that year. So kind of to what you were saying, I think a lot of the NFL players might have voted on, we're excited to see what McCaffrey, Lamar, and Tyreek did this past season. And, we already know Mahomes can kind of do, what he's done.
And again, this list, this isn't going to determine who goes to the Hall of Fame or anything like that. It's just a list for talking points in the offseason that, again, is voted on by players around the league. But it goes back to something that I talked about a little bit last week with a couple of different people that I had on the show. I think we're getting to that fatigue factor with the Chiefs. Now, I don't know if they can ever achieve like the level of hatred that people had towards the Patriots, because the Patriots were accused of cheating and the Deflategate and Spygate and all that kind of stuff. And, Bill Belichick didn't have a personality that people gravitated to, and Tom Brady is kind of an odd guy. So there was a lot of things kind of played against them outside of what was happening on the football field, which I think led to why people detested the Patriots so much. But man, if the Chiefs go on and win another Super Bowl this year, I really think that lovableness is going to turn for a lot of people, or they're just kind of like getting sick of it at this point.
Well, between getting Andy Reid a cheeseburger, as he says, and Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, it very much could be the opposite. I mean, people could ultimately really fall in love with this franchise like they kind of have over the last year. And I think it'll be, if they keep winning over and over and over again, if they're always in the Super Bowl, yes, I agree. I think people are going to get very sick of that. But I think if it's kind of like almost how the Spurs were, where it was like, they're always kind of in the picture, they're always kind of in the conversation, but, they're not making the finals or the conference championship every single year. Well, then I think they could,
And that's a really good point that you bring up there, because we want teams to be good. We don't necessarily want teams to be great. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, if you're the Spurs that are always in the mix but not in the finals every single year, that's fine. So when you pop up and win a title, hey, that's cool. But again, if you're routinely winning the Super Bowl 3 out of 5 years, like the Chiefs have done here recently, that's where people can start to say, maybe I'm getting a little bit over this. Now, they're not being, depending on who you ask, I guess, I don't think they get shoved down the throats of people quite like, the Cowboys are when they're good or whatever it may be. But like, they're always in your face. You know what I mean? Because whatever they do is always going to be relevant. And then you add in the Taylor Swift effect, which a lot of people got sick of. People don't like Patrick Mahomes' wife. They don't like his brother and that kind of stuff, where, the off the field stuff, I think, does maybe ding them a little bit in people's eyes, which I don't think it should necessarily. But I can see that tide turning a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, and I feel like the whole personal aspect to players' lives have just kind of, I guess, added more or less. I mean, we've seen it kind of in that case scenario work in players' favors. I mean, to Mahomes, it's kind of really worked against him. But to Kelce over this last season, I know for a lot of people that didn't really follow football, it made him a lot more likable, and it made the Kelce family in general also more likable. So you have not just, Eagles fans also because, the Philly connection and whatnot, but then you have people that, want to learn more about, the Chiefs. And it actually, I can't believe I'm saying this, it did a lot for the sport because it made people that didn't really care about football at least want to watch the game and understand the rules. And at least if you have people that are wanting to learn the game, that is almost more important than just turning the TV on.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I don't have a problem with the Taylor Swift thing or anything like that with Mahomes' wife or his brother or anything like that. It's just, it's funny kind of seeing how people, tend to react to those kind of things. Speaking of pro football, we are but a couple of weeks away from diving back into fantasy football. I was talking to my guys in my group the other day about when our fantasy draft's going to be coming up in a couple weeks. Losers of fantasy leagues notoriously have had some pretty interesting punishments they've had to encounter. Luke Combs had a very interesting one over the weekend. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro from WIS. I'm Tyler Head on your Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro from WIS hanging out with you on this Tuesday morning. Got our annual summer golf tournament coming up at the end of the month, August 23rd, at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. If you want to take part in it, you can sign up for foursome by giving Charwood a call at 803-755-2000. Register. Again, we want to see you out there on August the 23rd as we get you set for football season with our annual summer golf tournament. That weekend, by the way, August 24th, I will be doing my fantasy football draft with me and some of my buddies from back home. And I've yet to win this league that I'm in. This will be the third year that I've been in it. I don't think I finished last either one of those years, so I've avoided any kind of embarrassing punishments. But it's always funny, and you'll see the videos on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, when people lose their fantasy leagues, the respective punishments they have to go through. One of the more unique ones that I saw over the weekend, Luke Combs, country singer, was doing a concert in Cincinnati, and two of his buddies from his fantasy football league that apparently tied for last place had to come on stage and sing with him. They sung Walking in Memphis, very badly, by the way. Those guys were not singers by any means, in front of tens of thousands of people. I can't imagine how terrified they must have been. I'm assuming they're not performers themselves to have to do something like that for losing in fantasy football.
That sounds like the best fantasy football punishment ever. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would be horrified, but that's got to be the coolest experience ever, being up in front of thousands of people. And, oh, yeah, my buddy is, we're out here performing together. And, because I lost fantasy football, I'm just stuck out here singing and dancing with him.
I think it's one of those things that in the moment you're very embarrassed, but afterwards you can laugh about it. And, again, you're not famous, so those people don't care who you are or know anything about you outside of the few minutes that you're up there on stage. So I feel like it's something you could probably get over pretty quick. But, yes, while you're out there doing it, that's just got to be terrifying.
Yeah. No, I'd definitely be shaking in my boots. But it doesn't sound as bad as the story I was telling you earlier.
Now, have you lost a league before?
I've never come in dead last, but I was in 3 leagues last year. One league I won, the not money league I was in. And then the other league I was in, I came in second. And then the other league I was in, I came in 6th. But that league, I was banking on Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson to be a great connection.
That went out the window pretty fast.
Well, that's why I came in 6th. The league I did win, I had Herbert, McCaffrey, and Breece Hall. I don't think I'm going to be able to duplicate that again this year. But
now, how many leagues do you actively take part in at one time?
This past year, it was 3. I don't know if I got one draft on Thursday already with the league I won last year.
Yeah.
And then I think there was another league I was a part of at an old place with some old coworkers. We had created that league.
See, I feel like 3 is kind of pushing the limits because you get to the point where you start cheering against yourself because, okay, well, this guy's in one league, but this guy's in another league. They're going against each other. I need him to do well, but I don't need him to do well, and it becomes contradictory. I've only ever been in 2 leagues at once. I did that for a couple of years, but even then, I felt like I was crossing wires. Like, okay, well, this guy's my starting tight end, but he's going up against my starting defense in this other league, and like it gets kind of all out of whack there.
It was nice when I'd kind of have one team play really well and then one team not so much, because then it was like the weeks that I would have a team that would do great, it was like, oh, well, my team that was kind of suffering would not do so bad. So you'd always have somebody winning in one corner.
The Luke Combs punishment is really good. My favorite one that I've seen, though, is when the loser has to go, and they usually film themselves doing that, go to a Waffle House or McDonald's or whatever, and they have to stay for 24 hours, except for when they eat certain items off the menu. That's like takes time off. Like there was a guy that did one at McDonald's, and his buddies in the league gave him a chart of like certain menu items would take off certain amounts of time. Like, yeah, if you eat a Big Mac, like that's a full hour, but if you only eat like a hash brown, that's like 15 minutes or something like that. So we had to like strategize, because that's a lot of food, right? Like you can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to eat 24 Big Macs and be done with this in a few minutes. Like, no, you can't do that. Your body's not going to be able to handle that. You have to like strategically plan, like, okay, I'm going to eat this then. It's going to take these amount of times off, and then I only got to be here for 6 hours or whatever. So like those more elaborate ones are probably my favorite because of the detail and thinking that goes into them.
And then 9 out of 10 times, the guy is usually stuck at the Waffle House or wherever the venue they're being punished at for an extra hour and a half to 2 hours, trying to, I guess, check off 3 or 4 boxes on the bucket list. It adds a whole nother layer of entertainment to their suffering.
It does, and there's a challenge to it because, yeah, you can come out of the gate. Sure, you'll eat like 2 waffles or something within the first hour, and all right, now you're down to 22, but then you're full, and you don't have any more room for whatever else you can eat to try and knock that time off. So again, it's like the strategy behind it, and kind of like the I don't know if you watch like challenge videos on YouTube and stuff. There's a certain like entertainment value of seeing how people plan and strategize those kind of things, and the willpower and mental fortitude to get through those kind of things of sitting within a Waffle House or whatever. And usually like the workers are cool with it because they'll come in and be like, hey, I lost fantasy football. I got to be here for the next day unless I eat certain amounts of things. Like usually they're cool with it.
Yeah, I think something about being able to plan through that kind of suffering makes whoever is doing it an entirely different animal. Like I know I was kind of telling you, one of my good buddies when he was in college, he came in last in his fantasy football league. He went to University of Maryland. And so when he came in last, one night, him and all his buddies were going out on a night on the town, and his buddies got to pick out the outfit he had to wear out to where they were going. And I think I'm not exactly what the final rule was, but I think he wasn't allowed to leave, I guess, whatever venue they were at until I guess he got either somebody's number or he basically got that out. But it was really funny. All his friends took a lot of videos, and he made sure to send them to me the next day. It was a once-in-a-lifetime punishment for him for sure.
That's funny. That'll do it for today's edition of the X Point. Sam, we'll see you next week. Coming up next, it is the Garnet Trust Hour. Myself and Chris Clark, sponsored by Krantz Heating and Cooling here on The Game.